Imagine this. The year is 1962. The Cold War is at its boiling point. US and Soviet nuclear warheads are armed, soldiers are on high alert, and the world is seconds away from destruction. But in the middle of the ocean, deep inside a claustrophobic Soviet submarine, one man faces a choice: press the button, or save the world. This is the true story of Vasili Arkhipov, the Soviet naval officer who stopped World War III. The Cold War wasn't just a rivalry, it was a nightmare of suspicion. The United States and the Soviet Union stockpiled thousands of nuclear warheads, each powerful enough to destroy entire cities. One mistake, one miscalculation, and the Earth would become a graveyard. In October 1962, that nightmare almost became real. The crisis began when U.S. spy planes discovered Soviet nuclear missiles secretly installed in Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida. President John F. Kennedy was outraged. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev was defiant. The world held its breath. For 13 days, humanity stood on the edge of annihilation. But the most terrifying moment didn't happen in Washington or Moscow. It happened beneath the waves. The Soviet Union sent 4 submarines, each armed with a nuclear-tipped torpedo, toward Cuba. Their orders: defend Soviet ships if attacked. On board one of those subs, the B-59, was a quiet, unassuming second-in-command named Vasili Arkhipov. Conditions inside were unbearable. Imagine 100 men crammed into a metal tube, 300 feet long. No fresh air, no sunlight. Temperatures soaring past 50 degrees Celsius, 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Sweat dripping, machinery groaning, food rotting, men fainting. And then, the U.S. Navy found them. Cut to reenactment: American destroyers dropping practice depth charges into the water. American destroyers began dropping depth charges, small explosives meant as a warning. But to the Soviets inside the submarine, it felt like war had already begun. The B-59 shook violently with every blast. Lights flickered. Crew members clutched their ears. They had no communication with Moscow. No way of knowing if World War III had already started above the surface. Inside the B-59, panic spread. The captain, Valentin Savitsky, was convinced war had already broken out. Furious and exhausted, he made a chilling decision. We will not disgrace our Navy. We will fire the nuclear torpedo. One launch, and an American aircraft carrier would be obliterated. The U.S. would respond with nuclear weapons. The Soviets would retaliate. Within hours, hundreds of millions would be dead. But here's the twist: to launch the nuclear torpedo, the approval of 3 officers was required: Captain Savitsky, political officer Ivan Maslenikov, and one other man, Vasili Arkhipov. Music slows, camera zooms in on Archipov's calm face. Savitsky and Maslenikov shouted yes. They wanted to fire. But Arkhipov said a no. In that boiling, suffocating submarine, with explosions above and mutiny brewing inside, Arkhipov refused to authorize the launch. He argued that they should surface. That perhaps the Americans weren't attacking but signaling. That destroying the world wasn't the answer. It was a battle of wills, 2 enraged officers against one calm, stubborn man. For hours they fought. Crew members begged to launch. The captain cursed. The submarine lurched. But Arkhipov would not yield. Finally, exhausted, Savitsky relented. The order was cancelled. The nuclear torpedo stayed locked in its tube. Savitsky and Maslenikov shouted yes. They wanted to fire. But Arkhipov said a no. In that boiling, suffocating submarine, with explosions above and mutiny brewing inside, Arkhipov refused to authorize the launch. He argued that they should surface. That perhaps the Americans weren't attacking but signaling. That destroying the world wasn't the answer. It was a battle of wills, 2 enraged officers against one calm, stubborn man. For hours they fought. Crew members begged to launch. The captain cursed. The submarine lurched. But Arkhipov would not yield. Finally, exhausted, Savitsky relented. The order was cancelled. The nuclear torpedo stayed locked in its tube. The B-59 surfaced, its exhausted crew gasping for air. American destroyers surrounded them but did not attack. Instead, they escorted the submarine away. On land, the Cuban Missile Crisis ended days later, with both superpowers agreeing to step back. The world survived. But make no mistake, it was Archipov's decision that kept humanity alive. If he had bowed to pressure, if he had pressed that button, nuclear war would have been inevitable. You'd think such a man would be celebrated, given medals, remembered in history books. But for decades, Archipov's role was hidden. The Soviet Union never spoke of it. He retired quietly, living a modest life until his death in 1998. It wasn't until the 21st century that researchers uncovered his story, finally giving him the recognition he deserved. Think about this: every breath we take today, every child playing in the park, every sunrise we enjoy, exists because one man, in a metal coffin beneath the ocean, refused to let anger decide humanity's fate. History is filled with wars, kings, and battles. But sometimes, history is shaped by the courage of a single man who said, no. Vasili Arkhipov didn't just save his crew, he saved all of us. And maybe, the next time humanity stands on the edge, we'll remember his lesson, that calm courage can be more powerful than any weapon.